Okay, should be fine now maybe. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, I think it's good now. Okay. Been having some serious problems with audio and whatnot, but it's good. We're good. We're going. It's funny that this is related to Linux software on a stream that we're talking about transitioning to Linux software. So be sure that we'll discuss some of that kind of poor quality. Is anybody else experiencing poor quality, or is it fine? It's all good now? Okay. I think it's normal, just something got misconfigured, so. All right, well, welcome to the Engineer Man live stream. If you saw the notification, then you know that the topic of today's stream is transitioning from Windows to Linux software. And this is one of those things where, a lot of people who they're thinking about moving to Linux, they've heard about it, probably they've watched me evangelize, Linux a ton and thought, hey, maybe I should try it. One of the first things that people say, perhaps the number one thing that people say is why they won't move, is because it lacks, it lacks the software that they're used to. So I thought I would make a stream to address that. And I actually did a stream on this some time ago, but it was a couple years back, and things have updated a little bit since then. And I didn't go like as in depth into the transitioning of the software. I mostly just said like, what would it take to move to Linux? More so than now that you're at Linux, what would it take to, do things effectively as if you're on Windows? So if you have any questions, I'm going to be taking a bunch of questions throughout. I have a bunch of content, but I'll be reading chat, as well as we're having a slight problem with my question system. So I'll mostly just be reading chat and responding to questions in chat. So I'm just going to do a quick announcements thing. It just take a couple minutes, and then we'll jump right into the content. So there's two things for announcements. The first is Engineer Man Knowledge Center contests. We've been doing these now for approximately 10 months, and we do them every Sunday. Basically what they are, they're coding contests where you come in and you get a problem, and you try to submit the shortest solution for that particular problem. And we give out points and different awards, roles on Discord, things like that. So if you want to get involved, it's a lot of fun. And it's okay if you only know a couple languages or just one language, because you can compete within a language, but you can also compete overall. So if you want to get involved in those, the best way is to go to the Engineer Man Discord. If you don't want to join Discord, you can do so at the link that I just put in the chat. Also, before I lose track of it, I saw the 99 donation from Wally. Thanks a lot for that. Always love your content and attitude. Keep it going. Learn, earn, don't get burned. Yep, that's good. I like that. And I've seen you on many streams. I see you in the Discord, so thank you for being a long-term supporter. I appreciate that. You can ask questions, Neil. Absolutely. So the second update is on Piston. A lot of you have been tracking that project. That's the generic code execution project that I authored about 2.5 years ago, and it's been completely rewritten from the ground up, mostly by one of my team members named HexF, and he did a fantastic job with that. It's now, I'm probably gonna do an update video on it, but the TLDR on it is that we moved to Docker. And moving to Docker allowed us to distribute Piston a lot easier. And then the entire way that packages and software is installed to Piston is completely overhauled. So that made it a lot better for people who maybe just want Piston for a couple languages. They don't have to get the 30 gigabyte, full LXC container, or have to go through this, hour-long install. They can just pick the stuff they want and just use it that way. So that project is well on its way. Again, I'll probably do another update video, because the first video I did was based on Piston being still LXC. And since it's had such a significant change, it probably deserves an updated video. So that is the announcements. We're gonna just jump right into the content now. And keep in mind, feel free to ask questions. I'll be reading chat. I got it right in front of me. It's right here. So I'll definitely be answering questions from there, as well as going through the content that I have here. Let me get rid of my segments. Perhaps make myself a little smaller. Kind of big. Yeah, that's good. That'll work. Luke Tuber said, "How are you doing?" I'm doing great, thank you. Okay, so there's of course basic things. You know, there's basic operating stuff, calculator, calendar, background, screensavers. You know, you can expect that if you're going to transition from Windows to Linux, that you're going to get all that stuff. So I know, like if you asked my parents or some people, they'll say, "Oh, well, it's so important that I can set a background." And you can do that in Linux too. Most common things that you can do in Windows, you can also do in Linux. So you can just assume that if you are shifting from that, then that all works fine. Perhaps, I'm also ordering these in order of what I think is probably most important to people. So as we get towards the end, the stuff's going to get a little bit more obscure, but it should still be useful. So the second thing is probably games. Everybody says, well, I can't leave Windows because I play games, and I'm the same way. I play games as well. So the primary way to do gaming on Linux is probably with Proton, and that's assuming that the game doesn't support Linux natively, which in most cases it does not. So if you go to protondb.com, you'll be met with a page that looks like this. And essentially what this is people are reporting which games work fine on Proton. They're saying, the higher the rating here, the better it works. So, native would say like, the game runs as if you were on Windows. Whereas bronze or silver or borked, means that it just simply doesn't work at all. So this is, the first place to look. So like CSGO is green, native. This means that CSGO will work perfectly on Linux, just like it would on Windows. So you don't have to worry about that. And obviously, your mileage is going to vary here. PUBG is of course nothing. Apex Legends, nothing. Rust, I guess, kind of works. So, your mileage may vary there. I think we're having video problems here now as well. I can't seem to catch a break today. Okay, we'll hope that resolves itself. Yeah, something's up. Let me just go check one thing real quick. Hold on. Okay, I think it's fine now. Like Internet's one of those things where I can't predict it. There's nothing I can do to control it. It's either gonna upload fine or it's not. I think there's still some problems here. I might have to just restart it with a lower bit rate. This is so annoying. Okay, I think we're back, hopefully. Of course, yeah. Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good now. I just bit the bullet and just reset my internet, and it seems fine, I think. So, sorry so much for that. Of course, half the people left. That's a bummer. Okay, no big deal. We're gonna keep going. So we're talking about Proton. Game is one of the most important thing, to most people. The other thing is it's not, of course, you don't have to like, game on Linux. There is obviously an option to dual boot, which means that you can run both Linux and Windows. That's actually what I do, mostly because I don't really have the time to, actually I use two machines, and that's because I don't like to like reboot my machine right in the middle of what's going on. Okay, it looks like everybody left. That's unfortunate. Okay, no problem. We're gonna keep going. Yeah, I use two machines just because I like to just have them both side by side. I don't like to, reboot different things and make that work. Yeah, I know everybody's here. It's fine. We could do a stream for 70 people. It's okay. It's that's just what it is. The internet's one of those things that you just can't predict. I can't make it work. It seems to work fine all week, but then you get the stream weekend and you start streaming and it goes down the toilet. So I reset it real fast and I was still seeing 178. I mean, people may reconnect and come back. It's okay. I'm not worried about it. So, but yeah, try it with Proton. If it doesn't work with Proton, then you can always dual boot. That works perfectly fine, or just do two machines. That works fine as well. I'm not the sort of person who's like such a Linux purist where I won't use Windows at all. I like the way GPUs interact with Windows more than I do with with Linux, so I tend to just use Windows for that. So not a huge deal. The next big thing is probably the web browser. The good thing about the web browser situation in terms of Windows and Linux is that most browsers already have Linux support, and that's true of all browsers, I think, except Edge, and that's of course because that's a Microsoft product. Although I think Edge is now built on Chromium, which bears the question, why they don't just make it on Linux. You think that Microsoft would like to try to steal market share back, from other people, and one good way they could do that is by making Edge work on Linux, but it doesn't. So if you want Edge, you can't have it on Linux, but you can have everything else. Edge for Linux is out. So I actually, before I made the stream, I checked that. I went to Microsoft Edge here. I went to download Microsoft Edge, and then this big thing, not supported for Linux. So I think it doesn't actually have support for it. I thought that it worked, but I would have thought that would have worked, but I guess it does not. So it's okay. It's okay if they can keep Edge. Microsoft can keep Microsoft Edge. Nobody wants it anyways. But yeah, Brave, Firefox, Chromium, those are all fantastic options on Linux. You won't have to worry about that. So yeah, everything's fine in that case. Probably the next biggest thing is going to be the Office tools. This gets a lot of people, and this is largely dependent on like what you're doing day to day. So for me and for what I do, I don't rely heavily on yes, I think it was just a glitch in my charts because we're back up to 220. So it jumped from 75 to 220. So I think it was just a weird dip. Yeah, so Office tools is largely based on what you're doing day by day. I don't really do anything with, documents, spreadsheets, things like that for my day job and for things that I do professionally. So I don't have like this huge need for Office tools, but I can imagine somebody who's been working on Windows all their life and perhaps their job requires them to do lots of things with Microsoft software, particularly Office, to really need that to be a thing if they were to move to Linux. So there's a couple ways. Oh, and I forgot to mention that everything I've listed in here, it's all free stuff. So there's no software that I'm going to mention today that costs money. So it's all Linux alternatives that are completely free. So you of course have Microsoft Office Online. If you really, really, really have to, if you really have to keep Microsoft Office and use that, then you have the option to use Microsoft Office Online. It does happen to be free, and obviously because it works in a browser, it works anywhere on any operating system as a browser, which would of course include Linux. So if you need that, that's great. I tend to use Google Docs just because I like them. I think they're good, and I also, I pay for G Suite, Google for Business, so I don't have to worry about the same kind of privacy issues that I think non-paying users have to deal with. So I'm pretty comfortable using Google stuff, if it's paid, because it's explicitly written in there that they're not gonna, there's no ads, they're not marketing, they're not harvesting that data, because of the whole like, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. Well, in this case, I'm paying for the product, therefore I'm not the product. Or at least that's the case here. Just gonna read chat here. Yeah, PDF is a major issue. We're gonna get to that, don't worry. We're gonna get to PDFs. Do you have any good non-GUI doc editors? So I'm assuming when you say non-GUI, you're referring to like terminal. And the thing about like what makes a document in modern day, and it's bold text and it's pictures and things like that. So I think to actually have like a Microsoft Word that exists, say, in a terminal is kind of not super practical, just because of what makes a document a document. But you could certainly, I guess you could open it, but you'd be sort of limited in what you could do. There is obviously open formats, like Markdown and whatnot, that you can use to build normal documents, in a terminal, but it's not really the same, I guess, because you don't see an actual visual of it, and that's kind of the one benefit of actual document programs is the visual. So if you're not paying for the product, your other product, how do Linux distros fund their team then? So a lot of the times with Linux distros, they are getting donations. Some get donations, because companies will use Linux a lot, and so they're more than happy to donate tons of money to keep Linux development going. That's the one way. The second way is a lot of Linux distro providers, they provide premium support. And this is common across a lot of open source software, is they release the software open source, but then they say, if you want the experts that built this product to help you, then you pay some money. And that's been a pretty good model because it lets people use the open source software without having to pay, but it also allows them to make some money to fund the development and this and that. So I think it's a pretty decent thing, and that's how a lot of them are. It just really depends. Like you can imagine, Google and Facebook and whatnot, who have millions upon millions of Linux servers, like they're really invested in the future of Linux, and they're really, they have a vested interest in Linux continuing to be a thing. So, for Facebook to write a $50 million check to the Linux Foundation is kind of trivial if they know it's gonna help Linux continue to get bigger. So that's mostly how it gets funded. Yeah, paying for the product, still the product. I suppose that there's still cases where that's true, although it shouldn't be, because like nothing's free, of course, nothing's free. But if you're paying for it, then that should be the end of it. I think companies that make you pay for the product and then they also like harvest the data and sell it or whatever, I think that's just a bad company. I don't like that. Only one thing is keeping me from using Linux, and that is my security camera software doesn't work well for me anyway, though I'm still new to Linux. Yeah, it's sort of, in terms of security cameras, you'd be surprised how much open source software there is that can work as an interface to other cameras. Like I bought cameras a long time ago. I don't remember the brand exactly. It was an orange box. Don't remember exactly the name, but the point is they had their software and it was Windows only, but I had my software, which was an open source security camera platform. I can't remember what it was called. It was something Mind. It's like Mind Zone or Zone Mind, or I don't remember exactly, but I think it was ZoneMinder is what it was. And that was a open source security tool, security camera tool that you could basically point to hundreds of different cameras. And that just worked kind of out of the box, which was terrific, I thought. So yeah, it's like you always got to keep in mind that just because you have Windows software doesn't mean somebody didn't make some Linux compatible version that will act as an interface to that software. There's actually quite a bit of that out there. Oh yeah, so still use the Q in the chat just so I can quickly identify questions. Everything's good. Yeah, so Office tools, Google Docs. Now, Google Docs, of course, is a cloud program, meaning that you got to actually have internet. But if you want something offline, that's more like Microsoft Office, on your computer, then what you're going to use is LibreOffice, which was, I think it was formerly OpenOffice. I don't know if they're the same product or not, but that's a suite of tools that is supposed to be a direct competitor for MS Office stuff. So you have LibreWriter, you have LibreCalc, LibrePresenter, and this and that. So you can do spreadsheets, you can do documents, PowerPoints, database, all kinds of stuff. So the direct thing, the direct comparison for MS Office is going to be LibreOffice. And it's pretty good. It is. It's a good program. I think where that program lacks, if it lacks anywhere, is in direct translation of like docx, into LibreOffice. So like if you open a docx in LibreOffice and you make some changes and save it as a docx again, then I think it's not lossless. You're going to end up with a different looking document. Okay, support for OpenOffice is dropped in favor. That's okay. That's right. So then it brings us to email, and this is email assuming that you need a desktop email client. For the most part, I don't know many people that do this anymore because, phones exist. So in my mind, it makes sense to have cloud email. So I use Gmail, of course, but there's a lot of things you can use. If you really need a local email client, then there's this thing called Thunderbird. It's a Mozilla product. It works really good. It's really mature. It's been around for probably 20 years, and that's a fantastic. I think it even hooks up to Exchange Server. I think you can use that with Exchange Server, but you can definitely use it with just standard. Like if you run your own mail server, then Thunderbird is a really good choice for that. Next up is video players. So this is, other than Windows branded tools, most work on Linux already. So like, VLC exists on Windows and VLC also exists on Linux. VLC is perhaps the best one just because it supports literally every video format you can possibly think of, runs in VLC. Another good email client is Geary. I've actually never heard of that. Nice. Mailspring. LibreOffice is a fork of OpenOffice. Okay. Mailspring, I've never heard of that, but I see a bunch of people messaging it, so I might have to check it out. Yeah, so VLC is a fantastic option if you're already on Linux. Another option is a Parole Player and MPlayer. Those are probably the biggest ones. Those are also really good. I don't really have a preference as to which. VLC tends to do more. I think VLC is more than just like, open a video in VLC. VLC will also do music. VLC can also hook into like RTSP streams. So I used to use VLC to like run a camera feed, from actually the camera that's at the end of my driveway. And I did a video on this a while back. I use VLC to hook to that stream, and I can just play that like that. So, like, yeah, VLC is really mature, it's really stable, and it's really comprehensive. So that's probably the best one. Yeah, I just came here. What is this programming language you're coding with? None at the moment. We're talking about transitioning from Windows to Linux software. For anybody just joining, that's the topic of the stream today. Yeah, remote garage door stream. Yeah, Yeah, so I have a plan for that. I had a lightning strike and it blew up a bunch of my garage door openers, so I need to replace those and then I can do that. It's actually not that hard. Making a remote garage door, very easy. Because all it takes to trigger a garage door is just shorting two wires together. Like the button in your garage that you press, all you're really doing is just connecting a switch. That's all that does. So once those connect, then it triggers it and it starts going up. Yeah, Cody, we're actually gonna, well, I thought I had it. Where's Cody? Yeah, we're gonna get to that. Cody I have down here. All right, next is PDFs. PDFs is one of the most frustrating things, I think, for Windows users because, and I know this because the one of my professional projects, everybody uses, you know, $2 from Calyx. Any tips on teaching a non-techie person Linux? I'll start by watching the stream. I assume you're referring to your mother. Hopefully she's on the stream. So I think to teach a non-tech person Linux, the most important thing is to just try to draw analogs between things non-tech people understand, you know, in non-tech terms, and draw analogs to tech things, you know. So it's like, it really is a craft. Explaining technical things to non-technical people is really like a skill. It's a skill you have to develop. And you develop it over time, and you can really tell if you're talking to a non-tech person and you use tech terminology, they're just going to kind of stare at you and nod their head and say okay or whatever, but they're not actually going to get it. But if you can draw parallels, you know, like say you're describing a network switch, you know, don't say, well, there's a mesh in there and you know, you got ports and you got Ethernet and, you know, this is a layer 7 device, and, you know, don't say that. You know, say like, this box works like, you know, works like an intersection at a high, you know, at a, like a road intersection. You know, like draw a non-tech parallel and explain it. That was probably a bad example, but, you know, try to draw non-tech parallels to explain technical topics. And I assure you that this will also make you really well liked. You know, if you work at your organization and you're a master at explaining technical topics to non-technical people, like, believe me, you'll be well liked, because people do not like to be talked down to. Even though somebody doesn't understand technology as well as you do, it doesn't mean that they appreciate, you know, you overwhelming them with stuff they don't understand. It's kind of no different than if somebody who was a professional in say stock trading, you know, was trying to tell you about stock trading using all these big terms. You know, they need to be doing the same thing. They need to be. And I don't mean to say, like, don't dumb it down. You don't have to dumb it down. That's not the goal here. You just have to phrase it in a way that people understand, which is different from dumbing it down. Dumbing it down is just making a misconception that the person is just dumb and they're not going to understand, and you shouldn't do that. There's ways to do it. I like to think that I'm pretty good about that because I work with non-tech people all the time, and I always seem to find a way to explain to them technical topics. Yeah, there's I can explain networking very well to non-tech people. Yeah, I bet you can. Because you're a good communicator. You've been doing that for a long time, and I'm sure you work with a lot of non-tech people. So yeah, that's a skill that you acquire over time. Oh yeah, good point. Linux systems don't need anti-malware. I completely forgot about the whole, you know, I didn't even include antivirus in here. So I guess let's just talk about that now. So, you know, the whole antivirus thing with Linux. So the first myth is that there's no viruses for Linux, and that's a myth. There are viruses for Linux. The thing is, Windows viruses don't work on Linux. That's kind of the key thing, and that's because the people making viruses, they're going after low-hanging fruit, and unfortunately, low-hanging fruit is just the common Windows user. And they're hoping to just get them with something that they think is legit, and they'll install it, and all of a sudden, you know, they got their whole hard drives encrypted, and they're requesting that they send them Bitcoin to unlock it. You know, this is problematic. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't write viruses for Linux. Of course you can. because it's all the same. It's all just software. The thing is, nobody does, really. Not that often. The other thing is that the Linux security scheme is such that, you know, it's not as easy to like escalate to an administrator on the Linux as it is on Windows. You know, like if you had physical access to my machine, well, I shouldn't say physical access, because Linux security policy is such that physical access doesn't matter. Linux security policy is such that if you have physical access to something, they assume that you have access to everything. So like if you just have software access, like if you just sat at my machine and you're on it, you're still not going to be able to do anything bad to it, because my account requires a password to drop to root. Therefore, you don't have access to things that administrator has access to. So that's, of course, not going to work. Whereas Windows, you just sort of, you know, run as administrator, and it just kind of does it. You know, or it asks you, do you want to run this as an administrator? And you say yes, and then that's kind of the end of it. So you got to, that's why people write viruses for Windows and not Linux, because it's just easier. Now on the Linux, is there antivirus software? There is something called Clam AV, which is what that's for, but it's not looking for the same stuff that like Windows antivirus looks for. And you can install it if you want. It's not a huge deal, but you have sudo with a password. I thought you have sudo without a password. No, I have sudo with a password. When I type sudo, it asks me for a password each time. I could probably change that because I live alone and I don't have anybody that's gonna like, you know, mess with my stuff. And you can absolutely set that. You set that in sudoers with no past WD, I think. I don't remember exactly where to put it, but it's in the sudoers file. Correct, if you have physical access to a Linux machine, can't you just reset a password? Yes. So when I say physical access, I mean like unfettered access to a machine. So if I were to give you a laptop, you could of course just reboot that machine and boot to root and then reset the password, and that's kind of the end of it. But if you just had access to the software of the machine, then there's not a ton you can do. It would be like resetting a password on Windows. You would still need an administrator to do that. But yeah, certainly if you have full control of the machine and you have it in your hand, you can hold it, you can do whatever you want with it, then yeah, it's like it's as if you own it. There's no real protection. The only protection on the Linux that you'd have at that point would be like an encrypted drive. Obviously, if the drive is encrypted, then physical access only gives you physical access to the encrypted drive. It wouldn't actually give you access to the files that contain therein, unless that drive were already decrypted. Yeah, you can encrypt home though. Unless you have Lux. Yep, that's true too. Okay, so back to PDFs. So PDFs are one of the most frustrating things for Windows users, and that's because I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and they say, Brian, how do I edit this PDF? And I tell them, well, obviously you need Adobe Pro, Acrobat Pro. And obviously nobody has Acrobat Pro because it's not free. You gotta buy that. And it's super annoying. But on Linux, you don't have that problem. On Linux, there's two pieces of software that I use most commonly. The first is Ocular. I use that for reading just because it has a lot of features. And then if I want to make PDFs or I want to edit PDFs, I use a tool called Master PDF Editor. Now there is a paid version of that, but you don't need to use the paid version. There's a free version. And that will let you open a PDF, make an edit, and save the PDF. It does exactly what Adobe Acrobat Pro does, except it's completely free and it's on Linux. So it's fantastic. I love the tool. It's very stable. It's very great. And actually, what I do at my office, we actually have one Linux machine, specifically someone needs to edit PDFs. They just use that, you know, and Adobe Acrobat Pro is not cheap too. It's not like they're selling it for $5. You know, it's a lot more than that. It's annoying. Yeah, exactly. You know, I feel the pain of not being able to edit PDFs on Windows. It's terrible. Hi, Chase. How are you? You want to come on stream? Want to say hi? What do you think? Right, come here. What do you think? Look at the camera. Look at the camera, huh? Say hi to the stream. Say hi to the stream. No? That's funny. A wild chase appeared. Why would you even use Edge? I think people use Edge because that's what they're used to. You know, they've just been using it so long. I occasionally see, yeah, people just, they open Edge, they think that's the only thing that exists, and that's just what they've always been using, so they keep using it. You know, a lot of people, even though Microsoft Edge is like in the single digits for market share, it still seems to be around. The other time people use Edge is used a lot in like government, you know, where there's these really wide, broad, and heavy-handed, you know, tech policies in place where they're making people use specific software. That's a lot of times where you might see Edge. And I think that's just due to, like, you know, support contracts, and you know, Microsoft is saying we're supporting this environment for you, so you know you should use Edge. But yeah, PDFs, non-issue on Linux. It's terrific. Okay, next is cloud storage. This is kind of important to some people. It's not super important to me, just because I tend to just back up my stuff. I have some really basic things that I like to access across all devices, but you know, for cloud storage, really what we're speaking about here is like a OneDrive replacement, you know, whereby you have folders on your desktop that's backed by cloud storage, either like live, or they're just constantly syncing, really, you know, there and back. So Dropbox is perhaps the most like drop-in replacement for OneDrive, and Dropbox is free up to a point. So you know, you can use that without having to pay a monthly fee, as long as you don't have a ton of files. But that's perhaps the closest replacement. You install Dropbox, it's on your machine, it's constantly syncing, everything works great. They got apps and it works across devices, and that's kind of what OneDrive aims to do. Although I'm not so sure that, like, if I wanted to put OneDrive on Linux, that would work. So I guess if I'm somebody that works on both and I need files synced across everything, I don't think OneDrive would even work anyways, but Dropbox definitely will. They have clients for everything. Another option is Google Drive. I think Google Drive has like desktop sync support now. I know there was a while where they didn't, but I think they do now. So that's perhaps another option. If you are already in the Google ecosystem, that would be a potential option for you on Linux. And then finally, and this is what I do, is you can host your own private cloud. And that private cloud can contain cloud files, photos, you know, document editing even. I use Nextcloud, but there's a lot of options out there, like OneCloud and some others. So that's a good option too. But I would see that as like that's like a power user move, you know, to run your own Nextcloud thing. Like if you're just somebody who just wants to use Linux and just shift from Windows without any like lift, you're probably not going to want to do that. But if you're already on Linux, then and you're really familiar with it and you're comfortable with setting up something like Nextcloud, it's a fantastic option. And that's because you get all the benefits of like Dropbox and Google Drive, but it's unlimited. Well, it's just limited based on your hardware. Is there a version of Valorant on Linux? I'm not sure. It's a good question. I've never played that. I've never looked. How to make your own cloud? So you just download it. I know Nextcloud is just Docker. So if you can install Docker, you can install a Docker container and do some basic configuration, then you should be able to get that going. Does hosting your own clouds cost much? Well, if you host it out of your house, it's free, other than the electricity. If you host it on just a standard cloud provider, then you could be paying anywhere from $5 a month up to, you know, tons. But I would say the average cost to host a small cloud for yourself, $10 to $20 a month, maybe. So next is photo editing, and this is here again. Like we're going from most important to people to least important, or not so much least important, but you know, important to less people. So photo editing, of course, is very important to some people, but it's not very important to all people. And this is one of those things where you know, the direct Photoshop replacement on Linux is going to be GIMP. And I know some people are going to be upset about this next comment, but GIMP is not that great. It's really not. This is actually the one piece of software where I actually just use Windows, unfortunately. It's just the one piece of software. I don't know of a perfect replacement for Photoshop. There's near perfect replacements for everything else except Photoshop. That's just what it is. But GIMP, I think if you're really good at GIMP and you give it a try, yeah, I use GIMP just fine. I've been trying it for years, like literally a decade. I really, really want to not use Photoshop anymore. I want to just use GIMP, but I just can't love it. I want to love it. I want to love it so bad, but I can't. So I guess if can you not have Photoshop on Linux? No, you cannot. The oh, Internet's doing Internet things again. Just hang in there a little bit longer, Internet. Don't do this to me. I know the video is probably choppy. I'm just gonna keep talking. It is what it is. It'll resolve itself, hopefully. Yeah, the Photoshop situation on Linux, not great. Now if you're an artist and you're doing like vector type stuff, or you're doing publishing, like if you use InDesign or Illustrator or something like that on Windows, then there is a really good direct competitor for that on Linux, and it's called Inkscape. Yeah, it's dropping tons of frames here. Oh, is it back? Oh, I think it's back. Okay, it just needs to hang in there like another 20 minutes. It'll be fine. Yeah, okay, I don't know if anybody heard what I said a second ago, but yeah, if you're like an illustrator or you're doing vector art, things like that, there is a really good solution for that. It's called Inkscape. And this is one of those times where there is a good alternative on Linux, for artist type stuff. There's also a tool called Krita. I don't know if it's Krita or Krita, but that's more geared towards painting. So like if you are, I don't know what the equivalent would be on Windows for Krita. I don't want to say MS Paint because that's kind of ridiculous. But I guess that is the closest. It's like MS Paint on steroids. Like really strong steroids. Yeah, drawing apps. I think Krita is cross-platform. Yes, I did talk about MS Office already. That was towards the beginning of the stream. I know the stream's still kind of messed up. I'm hoping it just resolves itself. We'll try to get moving here before it gets any worse. So Media Center is another thing that's important to some people. Media Center not super important to me just because I don't watch a ton of movies. I don't have a huge music library. I don't have like a ton of connected devices that I need to stream video to. So it's not a major deal, but perhaps the biggest media center out there that's open source and free is going to be Plex. And Plex can be a client and a server. So it can act as a server for all of your video type stuff, but it can also act as a client that you can use to go actually watch this stuff. Whereas Kodi, which was previously XMBC, and XMBC, they used to have an ISO that you could write to a Raspberry Pi, XMBC, and you would basically just boot up your Raspberry Pi and it would boot into a media center. And I think Kodi replaced that. From what I understand, Kodi is just a client. But Kodi works with the Plex plugin, meaning that you can use Plex as a backend, Kodi as a front end. Or at least that's my understanding on how it works. Jellyfin. Yep. I have... Plex isn't open source. I actually didn't know that. So I'm glad you brought that up. Only free as in price. Okay. Jellyfin is totally free and open source. Yeah, Jellyfin's another one. Getpaint.net. Yeah, it's hard to convert MS Office stuff like Excel to Libre. That's absolutely correct, and that's perhaps one of the small problems with it is if you open it in LibreOffice, make a change, and then save it, you don't always end up with like the original document plus just the small change. There's always something that's going to be a little bit messed up, which is unfortunate, but that's what it is. Stream legally, yeah. Well, I don't use that at all, but you know, not everything in Plex is like pirated. You know, there's like if you've bought the disc and you made a backup of the disc to watch it digitally, that's not really pirating. You know, pirating is if you were to download it via torrent and load it into your system. And I know a lot of people do that. I don't even have a Plex server. I don't really have any, like, I don't have any digital movies. Let's put it to you that way. I mostly just use Netflix and whatnot. I don't really bother with having any kind of, like, you know, personal streaming thing. So next is torrenting. So keep in mind that torrenting, again, torrenting does not mean illegal. Like, torrenting is not synonymous with illegal. You know, the real benefit of torrenting is being able to like seed from 100 places, you know, to one place. So not only is the bandwidth spread out across people that have extra bandwidth, like people with residential internet plans, but it's also, you know, it also downloads quicker for the person who is, you know, who is actually wanting the software. So this is really common for like Linux ISOs, you know, which are often a gigabyte or more. Torrenting is a great way to download it without wasting the bandwidth of the actual company providing the ISO. So, and then Brave browser, like what was just mentioned in chat, Brave browser has torrenting built in. I think it's called WebTorrent. I think it implements WebTorrent. So if you open a torrent file in Brave browser, it'll just download it right from there. But the most popular, I think, Linux torrenting thing is going to be transmission. And again, I can't stress this enough. When I say torrenting, I don't mean like you search for things to download. You know, you must already have a torrent file or a magnet, and then you can use transmission for that. Deluge, and yeah, Qbit torrent was the other one that I've heard. I haven't heard of Deluge though. What Linux distribution do I use? I use Xubuntu. Yes, Brave is amazing. If you're not using Brave browser, like if you're using Chrome right now, you need to switch to Brave browser, brave.com. You won't be disappointed. Brave browser has a built-in ad block, which is terrific. It also has a mobile app with built-in ad block, which is actually the original reason that I switched to it, because I used to use Chrome, and yeah, there's Chrome extensions for ad block and YouTube ad block and this and that, but the Chrome Android app, you cannot install extensions. So yeah, definitely switch to Brave. That's for sure the best browser out there, without a question. Absolutely. Absolutely great. No, it's not just some crypto browser. It's not. You can disable all that if you don't want. Well, that's just totally separate. Like if you want to opt in to ads that pay you, then that's just a totally separate thing you can do with Brave. But that's completely opt-in. That's completely opt-in. You don't have to do that. If you want to just disable it and just have a plain old browser that has nothing to do with anything, then you can do that. They don't opt you into anything that you don't want to be opted into. Yeah, Chromium, yeah, like in order of preference would be a Brave browser, and then it would be ungoogled Chromium, so just plain old Chromium, the blue icon, not the red, green, and yellow. And then below that would be Firefox, and then below that would be literally anything else, and then below that would be Chrome. Chrome's at the very end. Question, how is your dual boot set up? So I just have a second machine. Like, you can't really see it, but there's a machine over there that is just for Windows, and that Windows machine has two things on it. It has Steam and it has Photoshop, and that's it. I don't use it for anything else. That's all I use it for. But that's not necessarily because I don't want to like game on my Linux machine. That's because my Linux workstation has workstation GPUs. It also has 8 monitors, which makes it already pretty resource intensive. It's just not a thing that runs games well. It's not for that. You know, its strength is in showing me a lot of screen real estate, not in, you know, video gaming. So yeah, I don't dual boot. I dual machine is what I do. Brave has built-in for it too. Built-in for what? It's a beast of its own. Yep. Yeah, 8 monitors. Yeah, I have a video on that. You can check it out. It's showing my whole tech setup, but it's just I assure you it's just not a machine to game on. it doesn't work well. And I use Quadro GPUs, which are for this kind of stuff. Each GPU has 4 mini DisplayPort connectors, and it's just not for gaming. They're small, they're great at what they do, but not for gaming. On my other computer, of course, I got GTX 1070s, which I know are kind of old now, but you know, they play everything I want to play, so it works fine. Would you prefer Nginx over Apache? Yes, absolutely. Okay, moving on, we're almost done. Video editing. This is important to some people. I use a tool called Kdenlive, or KDE NLive, or KDE, I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, but that's actually every piece of technology, I'm sorry, not technology, every piece of content that I've ever made on my channel was edited using Kdenlive. So if you are wondering if it's good enough, just watch any of my videos. If you like them, then Kdenlive's good enough. That's kind of how I see it. Now, what I will say about Kdenlive is that I don't do any crazy editing. A lot of what I'm doing is just jump cutting, and I cut out white space. Sometimes I adjust audio. Other times I like put images in or other video. Sometimes I do transitions, but not usually. So that's the kind of stuff it does. I think with any crazy editing, I can't speak to I can't speak to exactly how it'll handle under, like, you know, somebody that needs it to be like a Premiere, you know, but that's what it's supposed to compete with. Another option is OpenShot, and I just found that during my research. OpenShot looks like closer to Premiere than Kdenlive is, but I've never actually used it, so I can't say that for sure. I'm just basing that on reading the text for OpenShot and then also looking at the screenshots. That's what it leads me to believe it does. So that's another option. Next is sound editing. We're almost done here. Sound editing. There's really 2 things here, and that's Audacity. That's your standard editing. If you want to open a file and trim it or filter it, you know, take out the noise, adjust the input, like amplify the sound, just kind of basic stuff, then Audacity is what you're going to want to use. If you're like a DJ, if you're doing DJ things, then Mix is probably a good option for you. I think Mix aims to be, you know, more like your music composition, and then I think there's other tools out there as well, but I think Mix is more like a Fruity Loops, you know, competitor, and Audacity is more like but Audacity works on Windows too. I'm trying to think of a paid version. I'm trying to think what the paid equivalent of Audacity would be. Probably maybe Audio Booth from Adobe, perhaps. I think that's probably the closest thing. Is Manjaro also good? I actually don't know. I've never used Manjaro. Well, actually, I have used Manjaro just briefly, but it like broke my machine, so I stopped using it. But this was many years ago, so I'm sure it is better today. Oh, Audition, Adobe Audition. Yeah, I think Sound Booth. What is Sound Booth? I think Sound Booth is like a. Actually, never heard of Adobe Audition, but I also like the Adobe Creative Suite that I have is from 12 years ago. So, and that's the one I've been using this whole time. Obviously, I'm not going to buy a new one. I did pay for that one 12 years ago, so I'm not about to pay for another one. So it works fine the way it is. I think it's like Creative Suite 1, which is pretty old, but that's fine. Ishmael Mosa, hi G-Man, hello, how are you? What do you think about CubesOS? I have actually no knowledge on that. I've been hearing people talk about that, same with NixOS, so I intend to look at those. Oh yes, Blender, completely forgot about that. Yeah, Blender is like super OP. Well, I don't know if that's really video editing, is it? Blender is, I think, like modeling. But I forgot about that. Blender is perhaps one of those tools that is widely used in 3D art and whatnot, but it also works on Linux. It's also free, which is insane. So thanks for bringing that up. I completely forgot about Blender. Blender's terrific. If you do that thing, I'm not an artist. I can barely make a stick figure, which means I certainly can't use Blender. But I know, of course, I have friends that do artist type things. So. Ableton. I think Ableton is, I've seen some people use Ableton. I don't know if that works on Linux. Maybe it does. That might be a Mac thing. Excuse me. And finally, any other obscure programs that you might have, Linux has this thing called Wine. And I waited to the very end for this because often you don't need Wine. I know that I've been using Linux now for about maybe 17 years or so, 17, 18 years, around there. And I can say that I've never depended on Wine, ever, for anything. But I suppose as a last possible case, if there's no Linux alternative, and it's something specific to Windows, and it happens to work fine with Wine, then you can use Wine. And essentially what Wine is it's a way of, like the internals of Wine, they take Windows software and they rewrite all the system calls to Linux system calls in real time. That's essentially what Wine does. So Wine is actually running Windows software on Linux, not alternatives. It's like you're taking an exe file on Linux, you're double clicking it, and it opens just like it would on Windows. But here again, you know, Wine, kind of like Proton, which Proton I think is built on Wine. Your mileage very much may vary when it comes to Wine. And there is also there's a database, it's the Wine app DB, which will let you know what software runs great. It has actually the same ratings as Proton, so you can kind of get an idea on what's going to work and what isn't. In my opinion, what is better, Linux, Mac, or Windows? It's definitively Linux. I think if I have to pick a second best between Mac or Windows, I honestly dislike both of them equally. I'm almost inclined to choose Windows as a second and then Mac as a third. I know that seems weird, but Mac is just so utterly terrible. It's just so bad. And the way Apple controls their users, I don't really like that. I don't like that I don't like that I can't like use my computer until I jump through Apple hoops. I don't like that. Thoughts on Windows 11? No idea. I only recently heard of it, and no, Mac is not based on Linux. Mac is based on BSD, so it's completely separate. Mac is more like based on Unix than it is based on. It's certainly influenced by Linux in the same way that Linux is influenced by Unix, more or less. But no, it's not Linux based. And of course it's all closed source, so we can't know for sure on what it's really doing. But yes, we're done with the content. I'm just answering questions now. I'll answer questions until there's no more, and then that'll be it. What's your opinion on Photopea? I don't know. I've never used that. What is that? Yeah, so it's worth mentioning that like Linux is the kernel. You know, the whole like GNU Linux thing. So, you know, Linux is the kernel, which is And a kernel is nothing more than something that connects software to hardware. That's it. So if you want to connect your mouse to do something on the screen, then you need a driver for that. And the kernel is the one that handles that driver. So the operating system is the thing that sits on top of the kernel. So like PID 1 and beyond. And that's kind of your GNU stuff. What text editor is that, and why not Vim? Well, the why not Vim is because I like to do this. I like to select text, and I like to click Control X, and then I like to click Control V to paste it. You can't do that in Vim. So I like to use my mouse for things. I don't like to. And yes, I know. Don't mount up in the chat and say, you know, Vim doesn't work with the mouse. I know it does. It's not the same. It really isn't. It's not. So that's why not Vim. I like Atom. It's easy to do things. Why not VS Code? They're literally the same thing. They're both based on Electron. At this point, they're both Microsoft. They're the same thing. They're honestly no different than one another. What's the difference between Unix and Linux? So Unix is Unix is very old, and Unix existed before Linux, and they're really different just in that Unix is a commercial offering, and Linux was made as an alternative to Unix that was influenced by Unix. In present day, I don't know that Unix is still really used unless it's just some really old stuff. So, but the differences are not that substantial. They're really quite similar because one was influenced by the other. Yeah, Unix was absolutely paid. Unix was a paid commercial software. It was never intended to be free and open source, unlike Linux, which has been free and open source from day one. And as Linus Torvald said, you know, I'm working on something, it's not going to be anything major. And now here we are, where Linux runs everything. Oh, that's a good one, Galactic Ferret. What would you recommend for a remote desktop client on Linux? So if you are, TeamViewer works fine on Linux, in case you didn't know that. So TeamViewer is good. If you just want to do remote desktop, probably VNC. It's going to be your best option. If you want to connect remotely to a Windows machine, that actually works already with our desktop. You can use our desktop to connect to a Windows machine just like you normally would. Kubernetes has said, I'm not a programmer. I do work in IT and have been working my way through Python off for 5 years. Do you have any suggestions on how to improve more quickly? How do you stay motivated? What about versions breaking things? So if you're talking about new Python versions, for the most part, Python tries to stay backwards compatible, except for the jump from 3 to 2. So, but if you're already using Python 3, then it's pretty unlikely that like Python 3.9 would break something in Python 3.8. I suppose it's possible, but it's not common. They did the really big backwards compatibility break when they went from 2 to 3. As far as staying motivated, the best way to stay motivated is to take on, try to build projects that can help you out. Like try to get some value, get some value from your work. If you're just like learning to learn, but it doesn't result in any new value other than just the education, then that might not be as satisfying and it might not be as motivating. But if you can, like choose something that you do manually. You work in IT, so obviously you'll be doing some things automated, some things manually, but try to take like an IT task that you do and try to automate it with programming. Like try to improve your life, because that'll give you benefits twofold. That'll give you the benefit of the knowledge in doing it, but it'll also give you the satisfaction in maybe improving your life a little bit. So that would be my recommendations. But how to improve more quickly is just doing projects. Just the more you work at it, the better you're going to get at it. And nothing happens overnight. So gotta just Keep going after it. Eventually you'll be great. What genre of games do I play? I like, like Factorio type games. It's my favorite. Logistics and whatnot. Yeah, being chilling. I think building something and having other people use it is omega motivating. That's absolutely correct. There's nothing more satisfying than somebody else using your software. And I honestly believe that's why there's so much open source software out there, is because people are happy to make something for free if other people use it. Like the most demotivating thing on the planet, I think, is putting a ton of work into something and having nobody use it. It's awful. It's awful, awful. Which, by the way, if you want to get involved in projects that people will use, there's a lot of engineer man projects that are always going on. Piston is one of them. Piston has 1,000 stars on GitHub. It's used in over 5,000 servers now with like 200 direct integrations and tons of stuff happening all the time. So like if you want to work on a project that matters, that people will use for sure, then there's lots of engineer man stuff going. Are you self-taught? Yes. So I did go to college, but not for computer science. Everything I know for the most part is just I self-taught myself that. I don't have any like I went for college for electrical engineering. I didn't go for college for computer engineering. And I didn't go to college until I was in my mid-20s. So everything I learned up to that point was just something I did on my own. And I was already well established in my career by that point. Yeah, I can confirm I built an open source Roku TV remote. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I hate, and I've done it too. It's not just everybody will do that. You're going to build something that you really think is sweet, and it probably is sweet. To be fair, a lot of projects that people build, they are good. It's not that people aren't using them because they're not good. People aren't using them just because they either don't know about it or whatever. Yeah, late college goers for the win. So I'm former military, so that's largely why I didn't go to college, initially. So I did my enlistment, I got out, did some stuff for a few years, then went to college. But by then I was already, really like strong in my trade. So where can someone start on committing to an EM open source project? So I would join Discord as a first step. There's a channel in there called EMKC Felix Piston, and that's the primary channel for working on EMKC type stuff. So I would probably just land in that channel to start. And then there's a repo, github.com/engineer-man. And that is, that's going to be where all the engineer man community projects are. Can you make some tutorials over electrical engineering? I suppose I could, but that doesn't fit in the same vein as the content that I want to make. It's not something I ever used. Like I did graduate a degree, but it's not I never worked as an electrical engineer. So, and I haven't used or really looked at that since I went to college, and I haven't, I graduated, it's been a while now. It's been almost 10 years. So it'd be interesting to make content on it, but it's not why I made my channel. The engineer and engineer man is for software engineer. Do I like math? I used to be good at math. I liked it. I was fine with it. I have no problem. Thank you for military service. Yep, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for your support. Do you like working in Node.js? Yes, I absolutely do. That's my programming language of choice. I write nearly everything in Node.js. I have experience also in C and Rust, but I'm the sort of person who I know a broad range of technology, and the whole reason that I have that broad knowledge is because I like to be able to pick the best tool for the job. So I don't use Node.js for everything. I use Node.js where Node.js is appropriate. And I use C where C is appropriate, or Rust where Rust is appropriate, or Python where Python's appropriate. So it just depends. TypeScript or JavaScript? JavaScript, for sure. Python first or Java first? I'm inclined to believe that you should pick Python first. I think you have a better experience with that. Where is Rust appropriate? Good question. So I see Rust as appropriate in places where like C++ is appropriate. That's where I would see it as best, because really Rust aims to do things that C and C++ do, but with a great deal more safety. So I'm still not sure that Rust is a direct replacement for C. I think people will continue using C for decades to come, but because Rust adds a lot of new complexity, but C++ adds a lot of new complexity. So I actually see Rust as a competitor to C++ more so than C. So that would be my answer to that. Port forwarding, make a video. So I actually kind of did. If you look up how to host a website at home, you can actually see an example of port forwarding if you want to check that out. When would I choose Python over Node.js? I probably wouldn't, because I see them as the same, at least from a perspective of the web. I guess if I'm working on a project where I have the choice of Node.js or Python, they're more or less the same, so I would always choose Node.js. Do you like FANG and would you like to work there? No, I don't. I much prefer working in like my strong suit professionally is like rapid prototyping and getting people to market fast. That's kind of what I do. That's what I specialize in. I also specialize in the oversight of projects. Like I'm the guy that you hire to make sure that nothing blows up. To like if you want peace of mind for your project, to know that it's going to be taken care of and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and everything's going to be great and there's not going to be a major like business destroying catastrophic problem, then I'm the guy you hire for that. But I also get things going fast and cheap usually because I work fast. Do I think a developer should learn more than 1 or 2 programming languages? So I try to be knowledgeable in, like, I don't think you should learn 2 languages that do the same thing. That's kind of not helpful, but it's definitely helpful to know a systems language like C, C++, Rust. It's definitely helpful to know like a general scripting language like say Python, Ruby, or Perl, perhaps. It's definitely important to know a web language like say Node.js, PHP, Python. And then if you're interested in like, institutional object-oriented type stuff, then it's perhaps worth knowing C# or Java, something like that. So it kind of really depends on what you're doing. Pick the language for the job. Don't pick the job for the language. Oh, no, I'm not shilling myself for business. I don't want any more business. I'm already like maximum overloaded, but believe me, that was not an ad for for giving me business. I am beyond overloaded with everything I'm doing. So I love my current arrangement. I don't want anything new. So don't like email me to hire me. I don't want it. I like doing YouTube. I like doing the things I currently do, and that's that. So yeah, I promise that was not me shilling. You're like Gil Fell from Silicon Valley. Thanks for that. That's actually not the first time somebody's told me that. So I take that as a compliment. So thank you. Ooh, that's a good one. Do containers help you in your daily job? Yes, they do. I use containers all the time. In fact, I've completely switched my cloud server stuff to be entirely containerized, and I think that's the way forward. Also, I apologize that the stream has shifted completely from Windows to Linux software to just general chatting, but people seem to be enjoying it, and I like it too, so we'll keep doing that. Yeah, containers are so important. You have to learn Docker. You have to learn Docker. Don't waste another minute not learning Docker. You got to know it. That's because it's everywhere and it's so useful. So like my cloud server is just Git and Docker, and that's it. So I build everything into a container, I deploy it to that server, and that's it. No more managing no more managing tons of different versions of different things. No more nonsense, no more conflicts, no more anything like that. Just git and docker, git pull, docker compose start, walk away and be done. Easy. Why do you use Atom? I don't know, because I like it. Because I'm good at it. I mean, I'm sure, honestly, if I switch to VS Code, I'm sure I would be just as happy. The only thing is, like, I'm so used to all of the key bindings, I'm so used to all the shortcuts, and I feel real comfortable with it. That's funny. Christo said, I saw one of your videos about you having a lot of monitors. Does coding and working on a laptop give you anxiety? Yes, it gives me extreme anxiety. In fact, working on anything less than like 4 monitors I see as the bare minimum. 8 is kind of excessive. I mean, 8, I have a monitor that's just for YouTube, and I have a monitor that's just for Discord chat. So, you know, I could easily go down to like 6. But yeah, if I have to work on like 1 or 2 monitors, it's so frustrating and annoying, and I hate it. So awful. Describe the workplace where you'll be most happy and productive. I think it's going to be, I'm giving an end state and people get out of my way. That's probably the best thing. Because I like when people trust in my experience. I like when people say, you know what? I'm not trying to control what's happening here. I just want you to use your experience and produce something great. That's what I like. Any reason you're not using Vim? What is with all these? Like, there's no, Vim is not the best editor. Emacs is not the best editor. Atom is not the best editor. VS Code is not the best editor. Visual Studio is not the best editor. None of these are the best editor. And you know why? Because there is no best editor. The best editor is the one that you're most productive in. So the whole point of having a ton of monitors is to never have to use a taskbar. That's the whole point. You know, the whole point is to just have all the windows up all the time, everything you need. So I'm treating it more like a big whiteboard with like papers and magnets on it than I am an actual desktop where I click between programs. I actually don't have a taskbar. It doesn't exist. And that's because all of the screens are always up 100% of the time. And if I don't want a screen in front of me anymore, I just drag it away. So that's the whole point of it. I treat it like one giant desktop. However, it is split between 8. So like if I maximize a window, it just maximizes for one screen. Hey EM, show which Atom extensions you use. Okay, I can do that. Although I don't know how to actually like find the ones that are installed. I guess it's these. I suppose the main ones are autoclose HTML, color picker, file icons. Just like a language dash, you know, whatever, just any language you need. Minimap, it's very important. Pigments, that's very important. Tabs to spaces, that's very important because we all know that 4 spaces is the right amount. So that's really it. Like I don't have a ton of packages. It's really just this minimap over here. It's the minimap, it's the colored icons, and it's the tabs to spaces and the autoclose HTML. Like I don't have a ton of stuff. That seems to be enough to work. Yeah, Docker and container. Let's see, tips for freelance. Microsoft Word is the best there. Yeah. Gonna head out. Your videos has helped me a lot throughout my early career. Great content. Keep it up. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming to the stream. Hope to see you on another one. Which terminals do you prefer? I'm really basic. I just use Xterm. So this is my terminal of choice. I can't make it any bigger, but that's all I use. Xterm. Just plain old Xterm. No nonsense, no frills. Just real basic. I tend to just like that over all of them. I would hire you in a second. Thank you. Appreciate that. Back to the topic of the video. Any thoughts on running Win 10 plus WSL2 and Linux kernel native on Hyper-V? This is so you can run Windows 10 and Linux at the same time without having a dual boot. So Hyper-V, so that's a Windows Pro thing. So if you have Windows Pro, use Hyper-V. I don't have a ton of experience with WSL2. I've still never used it because I don't have a need to, but my understanding of WSL2 is it's not true Linux. I mean, it is Linux, but it's not the same. It's not like having a normal machine, I don't think. I don't know. That seems kind of messy. If I had anything, I'd want it to be Linux full-time, but then I'd have the option for Windows versus the other way around. What's your take on micro decided to come up with Windows 11 instead of treating Windows 10 as rolling release? So I don't, here again, I don't care much about Windows. So when they update or when they don't, not a huge concern to me. Well, what do I think about it? I don't know. I mean, they want to, I thought Windows 10 was kind of weird because they gave everybody free Windows 10. Remember, everybody upgraded from Windows 7 and 8 to 10 for free, which didn't make that much sense. So, you know, are they just going to do the same for 11? Are they going to charge for it? I don't know. I know that I just get I get keys off eBay, and so it's fine. WSL is still U1220 or whatever you want to run. Okay. I should probably check it out. I should probably go make myself knowledgeable on it. I haven't had a need to use it, and so I haven't used it. But yo, it's gonna be a free from 10 to 11. Okay. So I guess I don't really care. You know, it's what usually gets me is when these companies, they want to extract another chunk of income. You know, they increase the version so they can sell a new version. And like Mac is very, they're not good with that. They like to suddenly make an upgrade paid, which is not ideal. Any good replacement of C# for rapid prototyping of Windows desktop UI applications? So from what I understand, to make a true Windows native desktop application, C# is your only option. If you want to just make any Windows desktop application, then of course you could use Java. Java can make that, or you could use Electron to make desktop applications. Those are some other options to make it, but those would not be like true Windows desktop apps, not native ones anyways. WSL is true Linux? Okay. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna make a point between now and sometime. I'm gonna make a point to actually try WSL. I'm gonna try it out. I gotta know, because I feel like I'm underinformed right now as I'm reading this. Okay, I'm gonna take a couple more questions, and I think we gotta wrap up the stream. It typically only goes for an hour. We're at an hour and a half, so we're gonna wrap this up here in a second. So if you have any last minute questions, now's the time to get them out. One controversial question: is HTML a programming language? No, it is not. It is, however, a language. The M stands for markup, so it is actually a markup language. What was your role in the military? I was an explosives specialist. Do you use OBS? Yes. Yep, that's what I use. OBS works fine on Linux, so if you're a streamer, you can stream on Linux with OBS. Why do you use a floating window manager instead of a tiling window manager? So just the same reason that I described. I like to be able to move things around. And it's not really a floating window manager. I'm using the same window manager as every other Linux distro. The only difference is I have 8 monitors, and thus I have a large amount of space to move things around. That's all. What's your preferred desktop GUI tool? So I'm assuming you mean my preferred way to make desktop apps. So I don't make a ton of desktop apps. I know about 10 years ago, I identified the browser as being the de facto future app platform. And this was back when, like, it was more than 10 years ago. It's probably like 14 years ago. This was back when, like, Google Maps was really new. This whole rich applications, with XHR and real-time updates and WebSockets, and this was all stuff that was starting to come mainstream. And I said, you know what? The browser is going to be the de facto platform. It really is. And that ended up coming true. Like, everything is delivered via the browser. And even if it's not, now you have Electron, which is still stuff delivered via the browser. So I think to answer your question, if I built any desktop software ever, I would do so with Electron. Just because it's the quickest. It uses technology that I already know. And although it's not as performant, I don't know if Brainplot's in the chat. I can hear him seething right now. If Brainplot would disagree, but Electron I think is the way forward. It's not as good, but it makes up in quick development time. Thank you. Enjoy listening to the chat. Nice stream. Look forward to catching you next time. Steven, thanks a lot for joining. I appreciate it. Hope to see you on the next one. What mic am I using? I'm using the Audio Technica ATH something 2035. I don't know. It's like $150. Whichever AT Audio Technica microphone's $150. It's not that expensive. Kind of a basic one, really. I mean, they got microphones out there that are like $3,000. I don't need that. This one works fine. Thoughts on React versus Electron? So that's not really a comparison. You would actually use React with Electron. So it's not the sort of thing where you got to pick one or the other. Electron is just the tool that takes essentially a web app and delivers it as a desktop app. And then React is a framework you would use within that desktop app to make it. Got to a plus plus. Thanks a lot for coming. I appreciate you joining. We're actually wrapping up here in a second anyways, so you're welcome. I'll catch you later. Okay, I think we're pretty much at the end. I'm just gonna wrap it up here. So if fantastic stream. Other than the internet problems at the beginning, I'm glad people hung in there. I know the stream dipped down to a low of 62. It dropped from 253 to 62, but then it climbed all the way back up to 312. So that's good. So not the best, but that's okay. We kept going. I would have been happy if there was only 20 people left. I would have still streamed for 20 people. Don't you worry about that. There was no chance of us ending the stream because of some internet problems. We'll just push through it. So yeah, we'll probably do another stream in a month, maybe a month and a half or so. I used to do them every 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, but now it's been okay. That's good. As long as the audio kept going. Like I said, surprise podcast. Yeah, I guess as long as the audio's worked fine. If you want to go further, continuing with Engineer Man type stuff, the best way to do that is to join the Engineer Man Discord server. I'll put a link here, discord.gg/engineerman. Put that right there. That's the best way to go further. If you want to come check it out, say hi to me. I'm always in there. We got a bunch of stuff going on. I think the server has like 18,000 people now, so it's getting pretty big. Tons of people join every day. Lots of good discussion. There's projects, there's contests, there's coding challenges, there's tons to do. So, and everything's great. Yeah, so be on the lookout for the next video, which will be next Sunday, and some future streams. I post them on Discord. Also, if you want to give input to a potential stream topic, you can do so on Discord in the Stream Ideas Planning channel, if you want to put it there. That's the best place to do that. Also, if you have a video request, if you want to try to influence what I put out on my channel, you can definitely do so in Q2 video requests. I've been only making videos based on those requests for the last few weeks. I'm gonna continue doing that for the next probably 3 to 4 weeks, so that'll be good. And other than that, thanks a lot for everyone coming out to the stream. I really appreciate it. This was a pretty sizable stream based on my average, so I hope everybody got a lot of interesting knowledge and that you are smarter having showed up. So thanks again. I will see you on the next one, perhaps in the Discord and on all future videos. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend and take care.